Follow this recipe and this sausage will surely put a pep in your step. Today we're going to be making pepperoni. Pepperoni is actually an American twist on a salami. It's going to be a dried and cured sausage. We're also going to be using a ferment cycle for some tanginess, and we're going to throw it into a dry ager to reduce moisture towards the end. The meat block for our pepperoni is going to be a blend of pork and beef. I selected a pork shoulder or a pork butt here, and I also have some chuck roasts. We're going for about a 60-40 pork to beef ratio for our blend. So all I have to do is cut this up into some grinder manageable sized pieces, and then I'm going to throw them in the freezer for about 20 to 25 minutes. Get a good chill, a good crust on our meat before we grind it. The colder the meat, the better the fat and protein separation we're going to have in our sausage, and we definitely don't want that smearing. You know, one of the reasons why we selected chuck roast for this is you see all this fat in here? All that fat is going to be ground up and give us a beautiful flavor profile for our final product. We selected pork butt because it generally lends itself really well to sausage making, but for pepperoni, we're looking for a slightly higher fat content than usual, probably something around that 30% mark, and this pork butt's going to do the trick. All right, into the freezer we go to put a good chill on our meat. Got a good chill on our meat here. You can see it's firmed up a little bit. I also had my grinder parts in the freezer for about 2 or 3 hours to keep them nice and chilled as well. We're going to start out with a 3/8 inch plate here for our first grind, and then we're going to move to a 3/16, which is going to leave our pepperoni still pretty coarse grind for our final product. I'm going to load our hopper up with all the meat here. Both meats are getting mixed together so they can get ground together just fine too. First grind done, we've got really beautiful particle definition here between the fat and the protein. So in the interest of keeping it all cold, we're going to do a really quick switch on our plate so we can get our second grind going. A little bit of ice to force that last bit of meat out of our auger and we'll be good to go. I'm going to break down our grinder and then we'll be ready to mix in our seasoning, our cure, and our culture. On top of our seasoning and cure, we're going to be using some culture in our sausage. This is going to lower the pH level and do two things. It's going to help avoid any food safety issues, and it's also going to give us a really nice tangy flavor, which is going to complement our pepperoni very well. As with most sausage, we're going to add a little bit of water to help distribute our seasoning and our cure throughout the meat block. It is also going to help distribute our culture really well because we're not using that much, so we want to make sure that gets dispersed evenly. So I'll just add our culture to the water. And we're using a speed culture, so we won't need the extended period in that 85-degree temperature. Our culture, our fermentation process should only take about 2 to 4 hours. We're going to add in our maple cure, our pepperoni seasoning, our last additive, dextrose. This is going to be about 1% of our meat block, and what this is going to do is going to be the sugar to fuel the culture. If that culture doesn't have any sugar to fuel it and to eat, it's not going to do anything, it'll die off, and we won't get any of the benefits of adding the culture to our meat block. So we'll just sprinkle that in with everything else. And then I'm going to glove up and we'll be ready to mix. And I love seeing the particle definition still between the protein and the fat. Pepperoni being a higher fat content sausage, we really want to see a lot of that white. All right, so what we're looking for is we're looking for a level of protein extraction to start. We want those fats and the proteins to bind together, but we don't want to go too far. We want to make sure we still have some really good particle definition, so we have a really nice texture in our sausage. But that protein extraction is going to hold the fat and the protein together so they don't separate in the cooking process. we're ready to start stuffing our pepperoni. I have our sausage stuffer set up here with a 3/4 inch horn, which is going to be ideal for 32 to 35 millimeter natural hog casings that we selected. When we fill up the hopper here, we're going to start working the meat from the middle outward towards the walls of the hopper. This is going to help avoid any air pockets, because if we get those air pockets, it spells disaster for our cooking process. You can have blowout, you can have popping, fat out. A lot of problems can happen if you get air pockets in your sausage, so we want to do everything we can to avoid that. Load that up, and we're going to crank the plunger down. Start forcing our meat block through and into the horn here. We're going to stop it and pull back the pressure once it's about 90% the way through here, and we're going to start loading on our casings. I chose a 32 to 35 millimeter natural hog casing for our pepperoni. I like the way it feels. I like the way the smoke permeates through the casing to get into the meat, and I think it just works really well for this application. We're going to pass some water through here. We're going to get some water on our horn to lube it up a little bit and start feeding. This, like that. And you can see the water comes through here. So what it's doing is kind of untangling our casing as it goes through. It's also lubricating the inside so it passes easily onto and later off of the horn. And it gives it one final rinse before our final product. So you can tie this end if you want. I choose to leave it untied until I've got all my length made up. So I've got it here, and I'm going to start cranking our sausage out. So try and keep it nice and even, guiding that sausage off the casing. Just a little bit of pressure so it stuffs evenly. And then as we get towards the end of our casing, we're going to back off the pressure with just a few inches left, so that we can tie off, which is going to be right about there. And again, back off the pressure so we stop the meat from coming out of the horn. I'm going to start linking up our pepperoni, and I'm going to make them a little longer than normal sausage, because the idea is that once you get into this, you're going to slice this, and you want to make sure you have a good amount of sausage there to slice up for whatever your purpose is, whether you're making a charcuterie board or pizza. We want to make sure we have a good amount of sausage. So I'm going to use about a half a sheet tray length kind of as my guide. Skip one, pinch and twist. For the last one, you spin the other way. And that'll seal up that last link on the end. We're going to go through with our sausage pricker and eliminate some of those air pockets that we talked about. So we just want to make sure we get a nice even cook on these sausages. We're looking pretty good. Give them a poke and just a little gentle squeeze to work that air out if you do find any. We're ready to hang these on our smoke sticks and get them into our preheated PK100. We have it set to 85 degrees, which is the perfect temperature for our fermentation cycle. The smoke schedule we used was pretty time and temperature specific, so for the details on that, do check out the recipe online. Our smoke schedule was low and slow, and we only brought the internal temperature of the pepperoni up to about 128 degrees. We have both cure and culture in here, so we don't need to bring it up to the classic 155. We're also going to be doing a dry age process, which is going to lower the moisture content within the sausage, which is going to increase the acidity and lower that pH even more, so that will avoid food safety issues again. And what we're going to do now is we're going to hang these in our dry ager at a very specific temperature and humidity. So we're going to set a few aside so we can compare when they're done, and let's hang them. Our pepperoni hung in our dry ager for about 10 days until it got this really beautiful reddish color that I was looking for. And this is totally different from when it went into the dry ager. It's a lot more dense, it's firm. You can tell that a lot of the moisture has come out of the sausage, and this should be a really good pepperoni. So this stuff is ready to try now. So I'm gonna cut into it and see what we got. Even in the cut, you can feel that the texture of the sausage is a lot different. And look at that. Gorgeous particle definition between the fat and the protein. gonna give us a really good amount of tenderness while still being very flavorful. Beautiful red color from the cure and pulling the moisture out, and my mouth is watering at this point, so we're gonna get a few slices going here and try this out. That is a wonderful piece of pepperoni. Like I said, that particle definition with the fat and the protein separate like that, it gives it still a nice tender bite, but adds a lot of flavor and moisture so it's not too dry. The salt and the sweetness in there is perfect. You get a little bit of smoke. Absolute wonderful product, and I'm super happy with the way this turned out. That drying process really changed the whole profile of this sausage. In this process, I did separate 2 other sausages so we could kind of compare the whole dry aging process. I backpacked one so that we would retain moisture and not lose any during the 10 days. I set one sausage just in the fridge without the controlled humidity and temperature. And then this is our final dry aged smoked product. And you can tell here just externally, the difference in color and size is dramatically different. We started out with a 32 to 35 millimeter hog casing, and that's kind of the natural size that we have here. Even after 10 days just sitting in the fridge, a lot of that moisture was pulled out, but you can see there's a lot of work before it becomes actual pepperoni. And here in our final dry aged product, we had a controlled humidity situation, pulling moisture out of the sausage to create a beautiful, red, firm, delicious sausage. Now I'm gonna open these up and get a cross section so we can kind of compare what the rings of pepperoni look like as well. So we'll start with our refrigerator aged. And you can see here the particle definition is still somewhat comparable to our final product, but it's just, there's a lot of moisture in there. It's still a little tender when you squeeze, so that means there's still a good amount of moisture in there. And when I say moisture, I mean actual water. What gives us the tenderness and juiciness of the pepperoni is actually the fat content in the final product. And in this comparison, you can really see the difference between our non-dry aged product and our final pepperoni. The dark reds of those concentrated proteins are really obvious, and it looks drier. It looks like it's been a little dehydrated, and that's what we're going for. To officially be able to call this pepperoni, we would need to do some pH testing and some moisture content testing. We could send this off to a lab to get it certified, but if you follow this recipe, I'm pretty confident you'll have something very similar to a classic pepperoni. For this recipe and the products I used to get here, head to psseasoning.com. You can also check us out on all forms of social media, where you're also going to see some sub recipes that I use this pepperoni to make. Till next time, I'm Chef Jed. Thanks for watching.